Movie is based on true story, and it starts off with an emotional monologue delivered by Eric Lamarck, a professional hockey player. He talks about how bad he is addicted to drugs and how the only way to stop is to die. February 6, 2004. Eric is currently staying at a winter cabin, and has just gotten out of bed to start his day. While he's getting ready for the day, the radio sound in the background mentions that there would be a big storm coming up late this afternoon, but Eric is unaware of it. Eric then recalls his past accident, and recently got himself arrested for DWI. Here we learn that Eric is recovering from his drug addiction, and he must shows up in court in 7 days. As a result, he now lives in the shadow of his mother's disappointment because of it. Eric can't control himself yet that he decides to take a little bit of the illicit substance. Since the day keeps going, he quickly gets ready to go snowboarding. Unfortunately, he misses the bus that will take him to the snowboarding location. Eric then hitches a ride up the mountain with a stranger named Sarah, who turns out to be a ski patrol officer. They then arrive at the location, which will be Eric's snowboarding spot and Sarah's workplace. After thanking and bidding her goodbye, he takes a gondola up a ski hill, and takes a little bit more of the illicit stuff. Eric then begins with snowboarding down the slope. He is having too much fun to notice that the weather is slowly changing. Afterwards, Eric makes a phone call to his mother to inform her that he's on a journey to recovery. On the other side of the story, Sarah, who receives a report about the storm, quickly contacts the staff at the top, and considers to shut down the mountain early. Back to Eric, he's continuing to snowboard some more even though the visibility is getting bad up there. Unfortunately, when he's about to head back, he realizes that the wind has picked up, and in turn covers up any ski track site, making it impossible for him to trace his way back. There also isn't any cell service around when he checks his phone, which makes him frustrated. Eric now realizes that he's lost, and keeps walking, until he finds shelter by a tree. It is clear that the temperature is dropping sharply, and he desperately tries to light a match to start a fire, but fails miserably. During this time, Eric reminisces a childhood memory of his dad teaching his younger self how to play hockey, and telling him to never give up despite all odds. This motivates him to get moving, and tries to find his way back by snowboarding down another hill he comes across. But instead, this only leads him down the edge of a cliff. Despite not knowing where to go, Eric keeps on walking. And at some point comes face to face with a couple of wild wolves who menacingly growl at him. This prompts him to raise his snowboard and scream to scare the wolves, which works in scaring them off. But soon after, he begins hearing wolf howls all around, so he runs with all his might until he's put a considerable distance from them. He digs a hole, before crawling inside to warm himself. While lying here, he falls asleep to yet another memory from his past, this time about the time that he found his parents fighting. His mother insisting that Eric deserves to have a normal childhood, and doesn't have to constantly become a hockey player all the time, while his alcoholic father simply justifies his actions, by claiming that he doesn't want Eric to become a failure like he is. When Eric wakes up the next morning, he tries to map out the possible direction back to the resort, by making estimations about the direction of the path he took last night. However, it doesn't take long for this process to frustrate him, and finally gets him to accept the fact that he isn't sure about anything, and that he is completely lost. With no other option, he decides to snowboard his way down another hill. And still ends up in the middle of nowhere with no other sustenance, but a bag of nose candy. He takes it out and is about to take it as usual. Right when he falls under the ice and struggles with all his might to reach for the sinking candy. After obtaining it, he swims back up, And luckily, he makes it back out. As his condition getting worse, he continues to walk and stops by a pile of rocks to rest, almost passing out from the cold. Realizing he might get hypothermia if he keeps his wet clothes on, he strips down. He also notices a wound on his shin is getting worse, possibly caused by the fall. It is during this moment of weakness that he gets tempted to take more of the substance to numb the pain away, but he realizes he needs to have a clear mind more than anything to survive, so he dumps what's left of his candy to the ground. At this moment, the thermometer on his jacket shows a temperature of -20 degrees Celsius. The night arrives, revealing to us that Eric has been curling up buck naked this whole time, and is still determined to find his way back. He begins picking up his clothes, right when he finds a set of lights coming from the resort in the distance. Eric is obviously delighted to see this. That night, he goes to sleep while staring at the resort lights, and wakes up in the morning ready to go. He takes a drink out of his candy bag, revealing that he's been melting snow with his body heat. However, since it's been 2 days since he's had any sustenance, Eric starts feeling drowsy and soon finds himself spitting out blood. He falls to the ground, and spends the rest of the day lying there until the next day. Day 4 since he got lost, he wakes up, and here he discovers that his sock has frozen over his wound. Eric attempts to rip it away, but as we've come to expect, he ends up ripping a bit of flesh too in the process. Despite the pain, he continues walking, and resumes his journey to the building he saw the previous night. But to his surprise, the building is not there, meaning that he's been hallucinating about it. He becomes frustrated upon realizing this.
What do you want from me?
When nighttime arrives, he finds shelter by a tree. Hoping that he might find cell service, Eric takes out his phone, but it has run out of juice completely. Meanwhile, his oblivious mother decides to call him, and leaves a tearful message wherein she voices how she wants to be there for him throughout his journey to recovery. During this, she reminisces a happy memory where she lovingly embraces little Eric. Day 5. When Eric takes another look at his wound once more, it appears to have gotten worse. Once again, he rips away more of the sock that clings to his skin, and decides to eat his own frozen flesh that got ripped off. While this happens, he recalls another memory from his past, where he ends up living in her mother's basement, because he's lost his job as a hockey player, and has probably wasted away all of his money on drugs. After thrashing the furniture out of frustration, his mother steps in and tells him she wants to help him, but he must let her in. Back in the present, Eric takes out a device that emits a radio signal, hoping somebody would find him. That next day marks the 6th day since Eric got lost, and his concerned mother makes a phone call to a friend of Eric's asking where Eric could possibly be, because he missed an important court date for the DWI. The mother then learns the address of Eric's winter cabin, and decides to head there herself. On the other side of the story, Eric finds himself in the middle of a blizzard, hopelessly trying to get any sort of radio signal, but fails too. With no other option, he resumes walking. On the 7th day, the mother arrives at Eric's winter cabin, and seems distressed to find all of the food has frozen over, meaning Eric hasn't turned the heater on in a while. This prompts her to head straight to the ski patrol station, and reports to Sarah that she thinks her son is missing. Once the mother shows her a picture of Eric, Sarah recognizes him instantly, and summons a search and rescue team. She climbs into a helicopter, and begins to search around for Eric.
White male, 6 feet 3 inches tall.
Meanwhile, somewhere in the vast mountains, Eric keeps on walking with the last of his strength, and still hopes to find a radio signal. And then all of a sudden, he begins hearing the sound of the helicopter propeller, and starts screaming for help, hoping they'll find him. He crawls his way to an open space, but sadly, Sarah misses him and flies by. The helicopter search returns empty-handed, and Eric is left lying down feeling more hopeless than ever. It is at this point that he remembers his mother, and reminds himself that he has to keep fighting, because his mother wouldn't want him to give up like this. Back at the station, Eric's mother has decided to spend the night there, accompanied by Sarah, who sadly informs her that they have to call off the rescue in the evening, because it gets dangerous out there. This saddens the mother, and they share a heartwarming moment that gets Sarah even more determined to find her son. On the 8th day, Eric eats some more of his frozen flesh, and once again searches for a radio signal. At the patrol station, The helicopter pilot tells Sarah that there's no use exerting a search and rescue team, because this is the worst winter they've had in a while, and no one can survive out there in more than 4 days. Hearing this gets Sarah to grimly accept the fact that Eric may be dead by the time they find him after all. Back to Eric. This time he can faintly hear the search and rescue team conversing on the radio, albeit faintly. This forces him to trudge further to the top of the mountain, with little to no battery left on the radio. Having barely any strength left, he eventually collapses to the ground, and almost passes out. He begins to hear more chatter on the radio coming from folks at the patrol station. As he struggles to get to the top, we get taken back to another memory, wherein a fellow hockey player reminds Eric that he was on the fast track to becoming a huge hockey star, until he threw it all away with his drug addiction and erratic behavior. He then recalls another memory about getting into an argument with his hockey coach, because he was too proud to work as a team, and then another memory where his dad packs up and leaves him. Driven by his will to not be a quitter like his dad, and to no longer be someone who'd waste his life away, he continues to crawl up the hill until he couldn't anymore. He simply lays down, and leaves a message to his mother on the radio with 2% of battery left, even though he has absolutely no clue if anyone is even listening. In the message, he voices how he's resigned to his fate, and that he loves his mother, before he slips unconscious. Back at the station, a patrol officer informs Sarah that they just briefly picked up a signal upcoming from one of the mountains, so without further ado, Sarah climbs into a helicopter.
Point 60 west.
Hey, got him! Up on that ridge, 2 o'clock.
Finally, they finds Eric lying unconscious on top of said mountain. The team rushes to his aid and carries him back to base, saving him in time. Once they return, the mother runs up to the helicopter and embraces his son, grateful that he is still alive. The film ends with showing us Eric in present time, giving a motivational pep talk to children. He's got his legs amputated from the frostbite, but despite it all, we can clearly see that he's now in a better place and living his best life.